Hello and welcome to PocketGamer.biz's weekly news digest. This is for the week ending the 20th of March 2015. So only one story this week to talk about, and that's Nintendo's surprise announcement that it's going to start making mobile games. I guess to one degree the surprise is that Nintendo's making mobile games. For the longest time. Nintendo has basically been under a lot of pressure from analysts and investors and basically everyone to say, why aren't you making mobile games? Because it's not a console thing. Well, obviously, no one expects Nintendo to make games for PlayStation, but mobile phones are just completely different kind of platform, and there's no reason really that Nintendo kind of characters couldn't appear in mobile games. I think Nintendo's viewpoint of its CEO, Mr. Iwata, he's a smart guy, but he's always been very pragmatic in the sense that he's always been wedded to the view that Nintendo makes games for Nintendo hardware. That's the only thing they do. I mean, there have been some odd exceptions, but basically, if Nintendo doesn't make the hardware, it doesn't make games for it, because that's the only way they can guarantee this kind of superior experience of gameplay. Which, to a degree, does make sense. Particularly the world has moved on in the last kind of 20 years, even in the last 5 years, and hardware now is much less kind of a valuable. Really, gaming hardware is much less valuable than it once was. And basically, when you have an iPad or a Google TV box, I mean, these things are fairly powerful bits of hardware. There's no real reason that they can't run high quality games. That's really down to the developer. Obviously, the other kind of major reason that Nintendo has kind of made this move is the 3DS has not been successful as the DS, although it's still been fairly successful. The Wii U has been a total failure. I mean, I don't think there's really anyone who can argue that compared to Wii, or not even compared to Wii, that the U Wii has not done anything at all. And for the first time in decades, Nintendo's been losing money. So Nintendo, even if it wasn't at the top of the tree, it always made money. Now it's losing money. Clearly, a company can't just continue to lose money, even though it has lots of billions of dollars in the bank that it could kind of use. So a kind of a pragmatic decision that they've made. Now the nuances of the decision are kind of what everyone's kind of discussing or arguing about. I guess they always say the devil is in the details. So the announcement has come out that Nintendo will be making games for what they call smart devices, so phones and tablets. Obviously, it has no experience in doing these kind of games or making games for these kind of devices. So it's partnering with DeNA, who are one of the big Japanese kind of platform, or big mobile platform players, developer, publisher. So they've got a lot of experience. All DeNA's business is free-to-play games. So that's the thing that Nintendo clearly has not done any of and has no experience of. So to some degree, it kind of seems like a kind of a sensible meeting of two Japanese companies that are kind of similar in culture, in the sense that Japanese companies can be quite kind of similar in terms of their approach to business and their kind of processes and such like. Nintendo provides the great kind of IP that everyone knows and loves, kind of Mario and Donkey Kong and Mario Kart and Metroid and Pokemon, all these kind of games that people have grown up playing. And DeNA basically provides the kind of expertise of how you make these games mobile, and more importantly, how you give them away for free and charge for things in them, and also how you operate games. Games as a service has been well established now, that you can release these mobile games. People can be playing them for years, and to do that, you have to keep updating them. You have to have events in the game. You have to keep people get excited and coming back into those games. Nintendo games have been very much, we spend years making a brilliant game, we release it, and people play it, and then we don't really update it at all. So lots of things for Nintendo to learn. So I guess the kind of the commentators' camps have fallen into two lines. Everyone kind of agrees that it's in time for Nintendo to make mobile games, or they have to make the decision to make mobile games. That's a good decision from that point of view. They can't continue to hold out. So a lot of people, obviously, who grew up with Nintendo games are just super happy that a Mario game will come to their iPhone. That's just how they see it. They just kind of, Nintendo are brilliant at making games. So no matter who they're partnering with mobile games, they're going to make great mobile games, because that's just what Nintendo does. It makes great games. The more sceptical people, of which I guess I am one, kind of looking a bit more in the detail and saying, well, how's this going to work? So we've got Nintendo, who everyone knows makes great games. We've got DeNA, who know how to make free-to-play games. DeNA at the moment is not in a good place. So in Japan, it's kind of especially its sales have halved over the last kind of 3 years or so, as Japan's moved from kind of feature phone browser mobile games into smartphone games. DeNA, it's still a big company. It still has over $1 billion of revenue a year, but its revenue has halved. So still profitable, but they're going through their own kind of situation. Nintendo, as we said before, are loss-making as well. So to some degree, you could say there are two companies who were once brilliant at making games and brilliant at making lots of money off games are now not so brilliant at making games and losing money on games. And these two companies who are not at the, in the best form of their lives are kind of coming together to do this great thing. I mean, is that likely to happen? Are two companies not doing very well going to kind of come together and create these great synergies that are going to make brilliant games? There's a question mark there. Also, there's another question mark against from some of the Nintendo fanboys, if we can call them that, or certainly Nintendo fans who have loved Nintendo games, and Nintendo games are all about skill and gameplay and learning how to kind of do that kind of fast reflex action stuff that Mario does, and just spending a lot of time in the game, and kind of it being about your experience in the game and the skill and how you're leveling up. And that goes very much against free-to-play games. Free-to-play games are like you monetize around a meta game, so there's kind of big loops about, again, they can be about leveling up, or they can be about waiting for things to update, or they can be about kind of buying kind of cards. If it's a card game, you're buying kind of randomized characters to get the ones you want. So different kind of operations. And actually the gameplay of a lot of free-to-play games, and even the most successful free-to-play games, it can be very simple. And particularly in Japan, which is obviously the market that DeNA and Nintendo know best, the gameplay in a lot of these games is automatic. So the thing you actually traditionally we would see as the core of the game just happens. So if you have a squad of RPG characters, you don't have a battle. You can just the computer will just battle your squad against the power of the other squad. Who has the highest kind of power wins. So there's quite a different kind of situation of what the games are actually about. And I think to some degree Nintendo have they given an interview with Time magazine where Mr. Iwata has kind of said Nintendo will be mainly making the game, as if that's kind of will give people kind of a sucker that the nasty guys at DeNA who know how to make these evil free-to-play games won't be getting their hands on Mario. And obviously there's a whole joke about pay $1 to get Mario to jump higher, which is obviously the anathema to anyone who's played a Mario game. Clearly that's not going to happen at all. But then the counter argument is that the way you make free-to-play games is not by separating out this is the designer who does gameplay and this is the designer who does monetization. Those two things should be happening, together, if not in the same room, potentially in the same person. So the best games at monetizing have the gameplay kind of built around the fact that they're monetizing. And some people use the ratio. To make a successful free-to-play game, it's kind of 75% about monetization and 25% about the gameplay. I mean, it just is a different way of making games than we've seen, and certainly that Nintendo has experienced. So people like me, I guess, are a bit more skeptical about. I think it can be done. I think Nintendo and DeNA, as say, are both billion-dollar companies in terms of the money they make off games. They know how to make games, but how quickly they can kind of get up to speed making games in the free-to-play market that will generate a lot of money is open to question, really. And obviously, the first game they put out will be under a lot of scrutiny, so there's a lot of pressure on them. We don't know how quickly the games are going to come out. You would potentially think it's going to take them at least a year. We don't know if they've been working together up to this point, so maybe there'll be something at the end of 2015, but probably 2016 for any high-profile games will probably be the case. And equally, it's not like it's a different market. Nintendo now, they're competing with the likes of Clash of Clans, which is a game that's generating $2 billion a year. In Japan, they're competing with Puzzle and Dragons, a game, and also a game generating about $1 billion a year. There's only so much money to go around. So for Nintendo to kind of take some of that money, it's effectively going to be taking money from games that are already kind of highly established. So I think there's a lot of question marks. And obviously, this is the first week since the announcement has happened. There's still not a lot of detail. There's been no question about Nintendo announcing games or anything about gameplay, and that's clearly the crux of the matter will be when we see kind of some first gameplay footage, get some idea about how these two kind of similar but very different companies are kind of meshing together in terms of creating the experience. Because I think there's definitely a lot of goodwill for Nintendo to come into the market and do something different. I mean, I think that's all from what we expect from Nintendo. It's always been a very family-focused company. That's one of the reasons it's been so bad at online kind of gaming, really. It's kind of taken a step back because it wants to be this family-friendly, very kid-focused company. And there's another kind of question mark there about, will a Nintendo game allow you to buy $100 worth of in-app currency? Is that a kid-friendly thing? So there's lots of question marks over kind of how the approach will happen. The devil in the detail, as we've said. But it's certainly for journalists like us, it's kind of fascinating. It's a fascinating announcement and will provide us lots of writing opportunities in the months to come.